So, the death of the author, or as I have always heard it described, does author interpretation matter when analyzing a work? I'm going to talk about this through an example that the four of us are all familiar with, Up to Pluto's Sky. For our viewers, Up to Pluto's Sky is a poem that we read for an intro honors course that all four of us took. The poem is particularly confusing because the lines don't seem to have any coherency to them. And that's the point of this poem. The authors wrote this particular poem by randomly generating words using a computer. The author's intent is that the poem has no meaning whatsoever. Now, let's discuss whether or not that's true. Before it was explained that the poem had no inherent meaning, we were tasked with explaining what it meant. We all had a suspicion that the poem was meaningless, but we looked for the meaning anyway, like good students. And naturally, the presence of the word Pluto in the first line caused most of our class to come up with an interpretation that involved either the dwarf planet or the underworld, referencing the Roman god of death. I seem to remember that ultimately most of the interpretations were a bit broken and confused, because the poem was broken and confused, obviously. The question is, are these meanings valid? Of course they are. It's the unique experiences that each of us has, and the different ways of looking at the same thing that makes life interesting. We cannot and should not all have the same interpretation of a work. All of that being said, context is very important. In this case, the knowledge that the poem is randomly generated, and not inherently meaningful, that is, knowledge of the author's intent, provides important context that changes the interpretation of the poem. It is no longer about death or far-off celestial bodies. Taking the author's intent into consideration, it becomes a work about the themes I was just discussing, the uniqueness of our perspective of the world, dare I say, worldview, and a cautionary tale about how we are prone to look for and find meaning where none exists. Robert, I look forward to your thoughts on this matter.